Because you may very well understand, okay, this is what I do. But you need to be able to use that as a reference point, so you say, an anchor. Okay, this is where I'm coming from. So let me better understand where you're coming from. I got me. Where are you coming from? So you can begin to appreciate the strengths and the talents of others, because they're not going to be just like you. Now, sometimes you get along really well with somebody. It's like, we're always on the same page. And you may discover, well, you have a shared strength. Both of the full-time staff on our team, I share a strength with. It's not the same for the three of us, and it just gives us an ease of communication, connection, because we sort of see things in a particular area the same way, and it just eases the conversation. A lot of married couples I know, and again, this is anecdotal, Gallup hasn't released information on this, but a lot of married couples I've known often share a strength. And that may be some of the chemistry that we get, when we're attracted to somebody, because, it feels normal. They feel right because they get things the way that we do. And so again, just understanding what's going on here, where are our connecting points, helps us understand how we work together. I've got a handout that you're going to get. And would you mind passing this around? Now, this is for you to take home and use, if you're married, on your spouse. It's called the Great Spouse Handout. And basically, it's just a description of what your strength may look like in your relationship. Helps you to understand the best stuff you bring to that relationship. But if you have your spouse take this assessment as well, gives you a sense of when they're trying to be their best, what that looks like. Because again, being who I am, if you use love languages and stuff, my wife and I don't speak the same love language. It's not the same at all. And so trying to understand and appreciate when she's being, working from her best, what she contributes to our relationship is really crucial to a healthy relationship. I told you about my son's strengths. My wife has adaptability. She's very flexible. She's a social worker. She can just go into any environment. She's perfectly comfortable. And so she got that. She has woo, so she just loves meeting people. She has connectedness, which we share. And so we're able to kind of see all the moving parts and understand how relationships affect one another. And then she has belief, strong set of core values, and communication. Does anybody here have communication in their top 5? Okay, so let me explain something about communication. It does not mean you're a good communicator. It means you are a passionate communicator. So when you care about something, people know it. And so my wife communicates very passionately. And her belief ties in with that. So there's things that she really feels strongly about, everybody knows. And so again, just appreciating that this is somebody working from their best just gives you a better sense of appreciation for the people who have to live with you and you get to live with. Any questions about that? So let me toss this your way. This is not a personality assessment. And there's all sorts of assessments you can find out there about all sorts of different things that instruct you, give you insight into how you are, how you work, and so forth. But there's some really important things that are talent and strengths related that I think are helpful to know. And this has to do with extroverts and introverts. And I had suggested earlier we're going to look at this. First of all, I want to say that mixed marriages are common. That's why I gave you the Great Spouse handout. Did you guys just miss the great handout? This is like magic. You can take this home and use this on your spouse. And again, between introverts, extroverts, and again, just all the strengths, you're not going to share that many strengths with the people who you have to live with. And it's very likely that you married somebody who's not like you, introvert, extrovert wise. We just tend to be attracted to that, somebody who's different than we are. And if you think, I wish I just would have, found somebody to spend time with who was more like me, it's really not that good. I did a training with this one church, and they had about 25 people there. And as we were going through the training, I noticed that there was this one couple who shared 4 of the same top 5 strengths. And I just stopped and said, what, is this accurate? And he said, and they were sitting right in front of me. He said, this is you? And they said, what's that like? Well, everybody else there, that's 25 of them, start raving about this couple, how wonderful they are, what great servants they are, and it was true. Just how supportive they are. They're always in harmony together. Their number one strength they shared, both of them, was harmony. Yeah, which is beautiful, right? And then shared 3 others. So after listening really for 2 or 3 minutes of just this love bombing this couple, and I love them too. I've gotten to know them. They're great. I said, let me ask you a question. How do you decide where to go out to eat? And the wife instantly threw her hands there. She goes, oh, sometimes we don't even go. Because they're so wanting to accommodate the other that they just out harmony one another, and they end up never going out. And it's a beautiful thing, except, there's inherent weaknesses if we're all the same. There's just things we're not going to do. There's things that we're just not wired for. So the variety is really a strength. We want to find something we may have something in common with, but we're attracted to what we don't have. And so it's very natural to end up in these relationships with people that you really like, really want to work with, who you don't necessarily have all that stuff in common, but you find ways to work it out. I'm probably not saying anything anybody here hasn't said before, but I just want to say about that in regards to strengths. So let me tell you a little bit about the extrovert-introvert difference in strengths. So extroverts make up approximately 70 to 80% of the population. They are outwardly focused on people, places, experiences of connecting with others. They prefer social interaction to being alone. More likely to be socially engaged than to be happy being home alone. They want to be out and connecting. They're quicker to speak and react, but they're not necessarily better at relationships. We were talking about that like with people with woo before. They're great, but they kind of skim across the surface. It's like skipping a stone. Doesn't get anywhere till, then it just goes to however deep it can go. But anyway, that analogy stopped working right there. But they're not necessarily better at relationships. So my wife is really not an extreme extrovert, but she's high on the spectrum. So is my youngest, my blondest offspring, who I described as being the walking party, looking for a place to happen. Both very extroverted. Well, my tallest offspring is a brooding artist. Really, he is. Very introverted and an artist, a photographer, a remarkable photographer and artist, but just really has very little grace for others. He's got this deep inner world. And I got to live with those people. But we all do. We're bumping into people who are not like us all the time. And so figuring out where are they coming from, what are their strengths, how do I engage them is part of the challenge of all this. So introverts, which is to me, that's 20 to 30% of the population. They're inwardly focused on ideas, thoughts, contemplating social interactions. That means I'm thinking about what I'm going to do when I have to be with people. Inner dialogue, and they have a deep interior world. Deep in here, working things out all the time. They prefer time alone to ponder over constant social interaction. They're not shy. Shyness is an issue of self-confidence. Self-confidence is in my top 10 of strengths. Self-assurance, not self-confidence, self-assurance. And they're slow to speak, more likely to consider their words carefully. When they do speak, it's because they thought about what they want to say. Versus extroverts who tend to be outside processors who don't know what they think until they say it. And that's not a criticism, it's just that's how they process. I'm processing it out here, I'm testing these thoughts out by hearing them. Whereas the introvert is more likely to think, no, I want to say this just right. And sometimes I say, hey, give me a second, I'm just trying to figure out the right way to say this. Partly because I only want to say it once. So I'm going to say it and make sure it's right. So extroverts could be considered to be solar powered. in this respect. They charge their batteries as they're drinking in energy from the environment when they're out socializing or they're out and about in the world. This is what powers them up and makes them feel alive. The more people, the better. They're vampires. They gain energy from being with others. They draw energy from the interaction. My wife, who has lived with 3 males, because that's who we are, so she works all week, comes home about noon on Saturday. If we have no plans, nowhere to go, nothing to do, it's about noon on Saturday. She's about to crawl out of her skin, and she says, I need to go shopping. I'm like, I know. She doesn't need to go shopping. She just needs to go and be where there's people. And she'll go out for a couple hours, window shop, do a little this, do a little that, come home, and she's just a new person. Like, yeah, that's what she needed that, because we're not interesting enough. We're just, and it's true, there's a bit of a novelty involved for extroverts, is connecting with different people. Well, it's partly her woo. She's got to be around strangers and different people and meeting and engaging with new people. It energizes her. If you make them stay home alone with no one to interact with, it's like a dark cloud or night has fallen, and very little energy gets absorbed. Quiet isn't comfortable. They need time alone, but not nearly as much as introverts do. So both my extroverts, they need that alone time. I know it. I can see it when they need it, but it looks much different. So my blondest offspring, I remember, I was just discussing this with his brother the other day. We're driving somewhere, and I said, do you remember the last time I tried hey, boys, let's play a game. This is in the car. Let's see who could be quiet the longest. Because I needed some. And my blondest offspring, who, he was maybe 8, says, oh, Dad, I'm not very good at that game. I'm like, yes, you're right. That wasn't fair, Noah. We're not going to ever play that game again. Because he just drinks in energy by being able to talk and engage. And when we do road trips together, oh yeah, because this is, I know I've got company the whole way. I drove back and forth across the country with my tallest offspring. We never turned on the radio. We never listened to music. We never turned on TV in a hotel room for 2 weeks. And we only talked when he wanted to. It was wonderful. It was great. Just silence. It was like a silent retreat. It's terrific. Anyway. Introverts are like rechargeable batteries. They recharge their batteries with time alone to contemplate and consider whatever interests them. They often prefer quiet. Contrary to popular opinion, they do like people. They just prefer to select their company, and they don't get to thrill out of crowds. They drink in energy alone or in specific company. They like to choose who they're going to be with. And if they don't get to do that, it can just be draining. So I went to church yesterday, which I don't always like. I mean, I love the people at church, but it's a crowd. And so I go and I want to connect with a couple people and I want to leave. I don't need to say hello to everybody. And so after church, the person sitting next to me, we just engaged in conversation. We stood there for 10 minutes and talked. It was great, wonderful time to connect, really enjoyed it. And then I left and I didn't have to talk to anybody else. That's just me. That's my preference. I'm not the pastor. I don't have to talk to everybody. Now, what I do is I typically bring a book to church. My wife wasn't with me yesterday. She's been away for a week with her sisters on a vacation. But what I normally do is I bring a book. I leave it in the car. Because when I'm done talking, I go sit in the car and wait for my wife to come out. Because she needs to talk to a lot more people. That's just how she blesses them. I bless them by not talking to them. Every social interaction, even with intimates, requires an outpouring of energy. Without a healthy balance of alone time with social interactions, introverts just run out of gas. Does that describe anybody here? Okay. So remember what I said about extroverts being vampires? Introverts are blood donors. Every interaction requires us to pour out. Every single one. Even if it's with the people we really love and like. We're pouring out. We're not always gaining energy from interactions. Now, with specific relationships, they do feed us. But not all do. It's different. And so, understanding this about ourselves helps us, again, to know what to say yes and no to. Because I get me, I understand me, I have to give myself permission to be me.
Isn't it core strengths fall in relationship building?
No, because they're not all about the crowd. Relationship buildings are not all about crowd. It's about building relationships because introverts build deep relationships. So again, it's not either or the crowd or individuals, but specific strengths focus on specific kinds of relationships. And as you read through the descriptions, you get a better sense, okay, what this means for you. Let me just say this. Mark was saying earlier, mentioning, you learn to negotiate these sort of paths. So often when I tell people I'm an introvert, they say, "No, you're not." And I've had friends argue with me about that. Say, "Oh, that's okay. I'm sorry, I don't meet your description, but that's who I am." But I just balance my life. I know what I have to do. So I knew I was going to spend a day with a group of people, talking to people. Well, I just know how to balance that out. So I get up early, I have alone time. I drove most of the way here in quiet, because just the quiet's good for me. I didn't have to listen to music or radios or podcasts or anything. Just like to be quiet in the car. It gives me time to recharge. I just balance things out. And living with two raging extroverts and my brooding artist. When they were younger, we were all home together. I knew, well, okay, it's Saturday, we're all home. I've got to get up, take care of myself, and I'm an early riser anyway. But I get up, tend to my own things, so that I can be available for what the others need. So every Saturday now, if I'm not working, rather than leave my poor wife stranded there and wanting to lose her mind, we go to the farmer's market. We do some errands. We run around together. And usually by noon, she's done with that, and I get to go home. And but I'm taking care of her needs by being out and tending to our marriage that way. But if it was up to me, and I didn't have to take care of anybody else, my day would look a lot different. But this is who I am. How do I care for this so that I can now engage with others? Same thing with my blondest. Like, oh my gosh, she's going to be home all day today. He has nowhere to be. I've got to gear up to go. Whatever he needs to do, we're going to have to go do that. And so, you have to think these things through. There's also the idea of the ambiverts, and that's a person with a balance of both extrovert and introvert characteristics. And there's a spectrum where introverts, extroverts, ambiverts may be somewhere in the middle. But honestly, there's a lot of variables that go into this, because there's sometimes your batteries are charged up and you're ready to be more extroverted or introverted, whatever it is that you're not, because you're in a good space. The key is really understanding what's going on, what do I have to do, how do I manage the talents I have to function in the best way possible. Now, the reason I talk about all this, the introverts and extroverts, is, and how it applies to strengths, is it's coming here. First of all, you're not 100% of one or the other. And life circumstances, may bend you one way or another for different time periods. And I've certainly gone through stretches where I needed a lot more alone time than maybe I need right now. But you need to know yourself and how the talents and strengths function, so that, again, you know what to say yes to. I take a prayer retreat annually for a whole week with 2 accountability partners. We've been meeting together since college, so we've been at this for a while. We just did our 30th anniversary prayer retreat. And that's a really good thing. We know how to give each other space. We know what we need to do in that time space frame. But then there's, you were advertising for this today, your pastor's prayer retreat. And we do that in our district. And it's a lot different than what I need personally. But I go to be supportive, and I go to I go to most of the sessions. And they do an early morning before breakfast prayer session. I don't do that one. And not because I'm not up, but it's just like, I need that time for my own space. I just need these swaths of time where I'm not interacting to be able to now spend the rest of the day interacting in this format with others. And so I always make sure if I'm going to pay for a room for myself. I do not want a room with anybody. I do not need anybody in my space, so that I can make sure I am working from the best place possible for me, so I can be available for others. And which is why you need to understand your limits. Now, if you're an extrovert, and they tell you, here's what we're going to do in that pastor's prayer retreat. It's going to be a silent retreat. We're going to come, we're going to hear some led prayers, but we're never going to speak, we're never going to interact. There's no fun time or anything. Somebody just shoot me instead. That'd be really good. Because that's just not going to work for you. Understanding that again, but I know that won't, so what do I need to do? I heard a kind of gasp. It sounded like maybe somebody wanted to ask a question. I wasn't looking up though. Is there a question? I don't want to call you out if you're just gasping. Sometimes I gasp when I'm surprised, but knowing what you need to practice healthy boundaries for yourself is also a function of the talents. This is who I am. In order to work in an optimal way, how do I take care of this? What's needed? Now, strength finders can help you understand your decision-making process, but good choices are still up to you. So we understand how we process information, we have a better sense of what we're going to do with it, but then we still have to make good choices because they don't happen automatically. And there's still a lot of competing voices saying, you need to do this, you need to do that, we want you to show up for this, we want you to do that. You know, dad, mom, whatever. How do you make good choices? Well, Gallup hasn't released any information concerning how the whole introvert-extrovert piece with our strengths, but I think that our talent mix does help us to understand our orientation toward the world. If you look at that last page in the stapled handout, again, there's all 34 of the strengths, and it shows you the different domains. Now, some of those are, so some talents point toward a deep internal world. Things like analytical, belief, context, historical perspective, deliberative people with deliberative, there's a best answer. There's a lot of options, a lot of possibilities, but there is a best answer. And so they take time to figure out what is the best answer. So that requires a lot of internal processing. Focus, ideation, input, intellection, strategic, things like this. They represent this deep internal processing of information and experiences as you're trying to find your way through things. Others reveal a more outward orientation. Things like command. Anybody with command? People with command are not afraid to make decisions. They see the possibilities and they're able to say, we're going to pull the trigger. This seems to be the best way forward. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're better at leading. It just means they're willing to make this. They're able and willing to make decisions. Whereas somebody with deliberative, it's going to spend a lot more time processing because there's a best decision. They're looking for the best versus the other one saying, this is the obvious, let's go. Empathy, again, that's really focused outward, engaging and sensing what's happening out here. Includer, looking for who's there, who is missing. The positivity, significance. Significance is about excellence. We want to perform excellently. What we do, we want to do the best way possible. And then again, woo, which is the winning others over. These are all more outwardly focused. So as you're looking at those domains, the executing and the strategic thinking are, not all of them, but largely are about the internal processing. That leads us to outward action, but they're about the internal processing, what we're doing with our data and our experiences. Whereas the influencing relationship building are outwardly focused strengths. What are about gauging what's happening out here, interacting, connecting with what's going on outside of us. But we're a mixture of all these things. We're not one or the other. We are a mix of all these things. But here's what I want to say, and again, this is anecdotal. But the more, in your top 5 strengths, the more strengths you have in the area of like relationship building and influencing, the more likely you are to be extroverted. Whereas executing and strategic thinking, the more of those you have, tend to point to more of an introverted nature. It's just the orientation that we have out here or in here. And as I've worked through and talked with all sorts of people, it just kind of keeps playing out. It's like, yeah, that's right. Now in my top 10, it also plays out. And again, as people with more of their results, we look at it, it's like, yeah, it still keeps working that way. So I don't think, I just think it has to do with our orientation, which is what extroversion and introversion are. It has to do with our orientation. And so deep inner world or really an outwardly focused, that's what introversion or extroversion is. And how we tend to that is dictated by which one we are. So just take that and run with it and know that, again, as I'm trying to determine how best to live into these, what does it say about my need for self-care? If you're more extroverted, I need more time with people. You know, if you happen to be stuck in a cubicle somewhere working, or the church says, you know, Pastor, we know you're working because you're in the office, but you're all by yourself all week long, and you only see people on Sunday so they can reach you, you know, this is not a good fit for me if I'm an extrovert. You've got to be out and about and engaged. I have an extrovert friend who, church planter, and you know, she has Thursdays is her office day. It happens to be at Panera. But that's where she is on Thursdays, all day. She works there, does sermon prep, and people know they can find her there and go there. Otherwise, you know, with cell phones, mostly people can reach us. But we need to say, what do I need? And for her, it's a great working environment. She gets paperwork done, surrounded by people. But it works for her. So what works for you? Give yourself permission to live into those things, to grab onto those things, and to work that way. Don't let somebody else tell you, again, this is what you ought to be doing, Pastor, because of you're the pastor. This is what works for me. This is how I need to live into it. Questions?
Is there any kind of like an introvert extrovert test? I mean, because I always confuse myself. So many times I think I'm introverted, you know what I mean? And I've heard some people say, well, it's a good test. You know, just look at how you're in charge. You know, but I don't know. I just don't know if there's.
You know, I've taken all sorts of inventories, and you know, there's fine ones out there, but it's not exact science. It's really, again, a self-awareness issue. What do you need? Because depending on what state of mind I'm in, good space or not, I tend to score differently. Now, like in the Myers-Briggs, I score at like that 8 for introvert. You know, which I think was a 60 or something. So I'm not highly introverted. It's definitely my preference. I know I need to take care of that part of me. Definitely lean that way, but I'm not nearly as introverted as some others. But just knowing that about yourself and how to take care of yourself helps you to make the right decisions. So I don't think that it even matters that it's exact. It's just, here's how I lean. Be self-aware. This is how I lean. If I go on vacation, and I do have to go on vacation with my family, and so my wife is from Massachusetts. That's where her family is. The Troxlers who left had to leave at 1 were actually just came from my in-laws' church. That's my wife's home church. And so, you know, we have to go home twice a year to visit, and usually for extended stay. And so it's not my space, and there's only so many guest rooms, and there's really nowhere to go. And so if I'm not going to lose my mind, and not because I don't love my in-laws, I do, but if I'm not going to lose my mind, I get up early, I get in my car, I stop at Dunkin' Donuts, I get a newspaper, or a good book, and I go and I park at the beach and watch the sunrise and drink my coffee and get my space. And I schedule time with siblings. I got some family up there, you know. I'm going to go have coffee with my brother, you know, see my sister, do different things. And everybody's fine with that, but I need that space. I just know how to manage it. So understand that about yourself and how you function in different environments is the key. They make me go to family camp, but they have to give me my own cabin. By they, I mean the district. They make me go, so. Other questions? So what if what if you're weak? You don't have a strength in an area. What do you do? Especially if somebody's telling you you're supposed to. Well, you ought to be good at this because we hired you to be good at this. And so that means you should do it the way that Pastor so-and-so, who God rest his soul, did. You know, other people's expectations of how we should be. What do you do when you don't have those things?
Get help.
If you can afford it, yeah, get help. But it really has to do with our mindset. You're not weak. You may have lesser talents or strengths, but you're not weak. Don't think about it that way. Don't let anybody else make you think about it that way. It's not weakness. It may be the absence of a strength. A thin place. Yeah, I'm not really good at that. And you need to learn to manage around the weakness or the absence of a strength. And again, getting help is huge. And I'm a staff person. I've been a staff person in my current role for 16 years. I'm in my 17th year. I have always enjoyed staff ministry more than anything else. I remember this thought just came out of nowhere yesterday, but I was thinking about high school. And I was a drum major in high school. So what? Exactly. I wasn't the quarterback. I wasn't a lot of things, but I was the drum major. That was because I played the French horn, and up in New England it gets really cold. It won't work when it's really cold outside. And so the band instructor made me the drum major, so I got to march in front and keep everybody in time. That was, I got to wear the big plume and everything. It wasn't really leadership, it was just functionality. We need somebody to do that. You can keep time, so you get up there. And I did. But I remembered, I totally forgot about this. I remembered yesterday that I got an unsung hero award for the senior class award ceremony that they made us all go to. It wasn't voluntary, like we're having an assembly, everybody go down to the auditorium, and I got called up for that. And because of all the things that you do behind the scenes, and I did a lot of stuff. None of it was really prominent, but it's just stuff I like to do, and I enjoyed, and I could take care of it, and so I just did those things. And I realized that was a precursor of how I function best. I like being behind the scenes. I don't need to be the guy at the microphone. I don't need to be the guy up talking or preaching or doing things. My job is to make my boss look really good and to help execute the mission. I don't care if anybody knows what I do. My job is to facilitate what God is trying to get done. And so I know that about myself. I know how to function that way. Apparently it's always been there. I just didn't know it. But I can reflect back, and this is part of how we identify strengths, by reflecting back and recognizing the patterns in our lives. Wow, it's always been there. And so understanding I've got strengths, and that's what I need to really lean on and not worry about what anybody else thinks I ought to do. Now that doesn't mean everything's cool, and we don't have to work on things. It just means you work from a place of talent and strength, not from weakness. So here's some strategies to deal with responsibilities. Some responsibilities just make us feel weak. Well, you need to take care of this. I don't know how to do it. So 4 strategies are: stop it. No, you're given a task and it just doesn't work for you and you feel awful and it's just frustrating. Stop doing it. If you can get away with it. When I first came to this job that I'm in, I was replacing a guy who was going to the mission field. I had 3 days overlap with him to learn my job, and he was gone. Took our office administrator with him because they were married. Discovered after they left, oh, by the way, one of your tasks is to put out this monthly newsletter. This is the first I'd heard about it. I didn't know how to use the software that they produced it on. I didn't know where to get any of the information. I have one influencing strength in my top 5, and it doesn't really lend itself to that. I struggled and fought and cursed and really, really had a bad time that whole first month while I'm learning my job, making connections, and trying to put out this inspiring newsletter. And then it was done, and it went in the mail, it was gone. Victory. No, I had to start it all over again the next day. And I asked myself this question. I said, I wonder what would happen if I didn't do it. And I didn't do it. Nothing happened. And to date, no one has ever asked what happened to that newsletter. I just stopped it. Now, you can't get away with everything like that, but in that instance, and again, not even knowing anything about strength at the time, it's just like, this is killing me, I can't stand it, I'm going to see if I can get away with that, with not doing it. And it worked. So figure out, is this something, does this really need to get done? or shrink it. It might seem like a big, huge thing. Maybe it isn't a huge thing. Maybe I can find a way to reduce this lower on my list of important things that need to get done. I might need to talk to I might need to talk to other people in leadership, figure out a way to get around this, but let me find a way to shrink this area of responsibility so that it's not such a big, ugly, painful, heavy thing that's just making my life difficult. I tend to be do something, then if it works, people praise you, and if it doesn't, you can apologize for it later. But more than often than not, it works, and I don't have to apologize. So reducing something, say, we're going to change this, communicate to who you have to, but let me see if we can just shrink this thing, make it not such a big deal. Another strategy is to strengthen it. That means, do I have a different strength I can leverage here to work toward getting this done? Okay, because I mentioned earlier, I can work a room. It's not woo, because woo isn't there for me, but it's my strategic. And I've got enough experience, I can look around, I can read the room, I get a sense of who's there and who isn't, who I may need to speak to. Familiarity helps, and I go and make those strategic contacts rather than just have to, like somehow it's going to charge my battery to talk to everybody, but I make sure I talk to everybody I need to. Bring a different strength, see if there's a different way to approach this, leverage what you've got to approach things in a different way. Or this is really the best. Well, I think it's the best. Share it. Who do I know who loves this? Do I know somebody who really likes this kind of stuff? And I'm dealing with this right now with some administrative things. There's some tasks they need to get done. So, people who are like really web savvy and like working with websites and that's wonderful. I don't like it at all. And at all. And even just signing into an account sometimes makes me want to lose my mind. My wife was out of town and said, I think I might have had I want to make sure our credit card only had this one charge on it and something didn't happen and somebody's abusing it. Can you get on our credit card account and check it? I said, no. Because I rely on the statements coming to read them. I've never done that. I don't even know how to do that. Well, I really need you to do that. Well, okay. She's out of town. So I stopped everything I was doing, went and did it, spent half an hour just getting signed in, account set up, everything, so I could look and see that, yeah, everything's fine. But I was so stressed out by the time that was over. Huh? I do love my wife. And that's why I did it. But now it's done. I'm never doing it again. But for me, it's just my brain doesn't work really well. I'm not intuitive with websites. So whenever I have to get onto a new one, it's like, set up an account. I have a number of accounts that the password is, this is so stupid. Because by the number of time, no, you need another vowel. No, now you need a capital. So I just go, that's my go-to. So this is so stupid, I can't stand it. So I just have to remember that's that website. So find somebody who really thrives at that. You share the respect. You share the responsibility. Who do I know who really gets excited? I know people who love administration. That doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, I don't mind it, but I don't love it. And then you find somebody who's just like, I'm in my happy place crunching all these numbers. Like, that's great. Good for you. That's awesome. Glad to give you a task that you love. And I don't have to do it because I shared it. And now they're bringing their strengths to bear. That's really the genius of ministry leadership. Look around and find people who love to do things and then let them do them. And get out of the way. And especially if it's partnering with people, because then you're training people to do what you do and take care of the things that you do. And if something happens to you, there's somebody there to do it. And you don't have to do it. It's a beautiful thing. So those are the 4 strategies. And we just got a few more minutes. And let me, see, if you're not sitting near somebody, you need to, because you're going to have a conversation right now. Here's what I want you to do for the next couple of minutes. The more clearly you understand how your greatest talents surface in your role, the better you'll be at intentionally applying to choose strengths, to work towards strengths. So I want you to take one of your strengths and discuss with somebody else how you've applied that talent in your role in the last 5 days or the last 7 days. Just think, here's one of my strengths. Where have I actually seen it working? Just take a couple minutes and talk to each other, and then we're gonna have your report back. Do not dilly-dally, where time's wasted. So if we could get just for a moment, just a couple people to share maybe an insight that you got kind of talking this out. Where did you see a strength working in the last week?
You mean sharing about the other person?
Well, no, just share about yourself, but you had to talk it out, so.
I was saying that just recently I had one of these great ideas from my strategic thinking arm. And first I go over it with my wife because she usually shoots the most of those down. Tells me what's not going to work and how that's not going to happen. This one she didn't completely shoot down. So then I started talking with people from the church and I brought it up to the congregation as something I was looking at doing. And one area that I have nothing in is influencing. But a gentleman in the congregation raised his hand and said, if you go through with this, Pastor, I'll give $100 toward it.
Great.
So, yeah, to me, that was
Yeah.
affirmation and also saying, I'm going to help you get it off the ground because, we know that that's not one of your strong
Right.
suits.
I think also the fact that maybe your wife has got wisdom that you don't have that helps you to understand where are the things to really put in a tent peg,
Oh, absolutely.
right here. Yeah, great.
I value those conversations, even when I really liked what I had thought of and she doesn't think it's going to ever work.
That's why I don't tell my wife.
One more person. What's an insight you got?
I'm mature and always inside me a part that motivates me to do things again and again. That is people's life is changing.
Mm-hmm.
Discipleship program.
Mm-hmm.
It's always I engaging do more
Mm-hmm.
because of I see their life is changing.
Yeah. And there's more to be done.
Yeah.
Right, right. Good, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So again, these are things that are helpful just to be able to talk out with others. People who have your best interest in mind, people who love you, have your well-being as a concern of theirs, to just share and talk out, because sometimes we need to hear them said, we need to hear their insight back, because they see things that we don't. That's why God gave them to us. And so as we talk together, share together, we get a much better understanding of how these are working. And again, people will share with you what they see. Because we're not always aware of how we're impacting, or again, sometimes our normal is so close to us, we're not aware that it's different. And so being able to talk about our talents and ask people for their input helps us to better trust ourselves. Because somebody says, yeah, I think you're really good at this. I told you about that accountability group I have, and one of the things we do for each other, not every year, but periodically, is say, we call it the hot seat. And it's because one year we stayed in a place that half the window glass was missing. It was November. And so we had the wood stove going, and the person who got to sit next to the closest to the stove was the hot seat. And the rest of us stood around them and affirmed them and told them how we saw God work in their lives. And so having those kind of relationships where you can say, here's how I'm thinking, here's how I'm processing, here's what I think, how this talent might be working, having somebody else to share that back, reflect that back to you is affirmation, and it helps us to better get a picture of what God sees in the mirror when he sees us. When we hold that up, what is really going on here? Because we're not always to be trusted in how we perceive ourselves. Self-awareness comes from also the capacity to trust others to share what they see. So, that was the feedback slide right there. I forgot to put it up. So I'll just go on to back to the 4 domains. One last couple of thoughts. Again, remember how you function in a group, the domains you're functioning from, it's always happening, whether it's a team you're on or your family. This is how you work. When my wife says we have to go visit the in-laws, we have to make a trip. Here's what I think. What time of day, what day of the week, what time of the year is it, what are the weather patterns, what is it a holiday, what are the traffic patterns going to be between my house down near DC and Boston, what time of day are we leaving, who's going, which car do we need to take, how do we need to pack. That all happens instantaneously. I'm working that all out because that's the things I need to know. Because I'm strategic. I'm trying to figure out how to make this trip effective and efficient and fast. Because, who wants to drive through New York City? Ever. But there's but there's times when it's not that hard. So can I work this out? That's how it works for me. So the first 2 times we made trips after we moved down to Maryland, I tried to have those conversations out loud with my wife. The second time, she said this to me: I never want to have this conversation ever again. Tell me when to be in the car. Now, her number one is adaptability. She's very flexible and able to work in different environments. She didn't need to think about any of those things. I need to think about those things. And I would have been functioning from my basement if I had forced her to process that way. She just needed to know when to be in the car. Knowing me, I know what I bring to the team, but I also know how they function and what they need. Nobody else has to figure those things out, just me. My boys need to know what to entertain themselves with in the car. So I tell them when we're leaving, what time, what they can bring, what their power outlet is. But anyway. So again, it affects your team, it affects your family. This is valuable insight to gain because it's not just about working with the church board. It's about all of your valuable relationships. So the next thing to do and to focus on is this: pay attention to your strengths. Pay attention, focus, notice when you're working from them. Remind yourself about them. I keep a post-it on my desktop of my strengths, but also my family strengths. So when I see them functioning that way, I can point it out. Hey, you know what that is right there? And now they do that to me. Oh, Dad, I was working for my restorative. Yeah, that's exactly what you were doing. And it becomes part of their normal conversation to pay attention to their strengths. We've been doing this for a while, but it becomes part of your normal. It's just like when we're trying to introduce new ideas to our church, we're trying to get them to create a new normal, a new sense of this is who we want to be. When we pay attention to these things, we place value on it, and we help others to value them as well. Read about your strengths. Go back and read the information. Write out those definitions. Talk with them about friends and family who love you, who care about you, who want to listen to you. Learn how to apply them, where they work, where they're best function, where they're useful. And as you learn, grow, also trust yourself. God gave these things to you. You got people around you who love you and can be trusted to tell you when you're being done. So listen to them and learn and grow from it. That is the presentation. My last slide has to do with the trainings that are available, if anybody is interested. There is a website. Is it on there? Yes. See the transformingleadersinstitute.org? That replaces the old Nazarene Strengths Institute. And we are winding that up and making trainings available for anybody who's have interest in going deeper with any of these issues. You can also find these on the Mid-Atlantic District website, which is manaz.org, under training opportunities. But we offer Strengths 101 training, which is basically taking a deep dive, one-day deep dive into understanding how your strengths function in your life, much deeper than we've gone today. There's also 301 strengths training, which is, okay, that 301's in the wrong place. But anyway, I kind of all got messed up, but I really messed that all up. Okay, so where it says 101, ignore the 301 and the emotional intelligence stuff. That got, I don't know where that came from. It's from a different slide. But 201 strengths advising training is basically coaching training. If you want to learn how to coach and other people around their strengths, it's a great discipleship tool. I use this with premarital counseling all the time, leadership development. It's, again, something you can do to learn how to work with others, draw their talents out of them, and help them to understand how to apply them. Then there's strengths-based leadership training, which is a course, basically a 2-day course on what does it look like when I'm leading from my strengths. And when you leave that class with a ministry plan. Based on the conversation, what we've been doing in the last couple of days together, working with a cohort together, this seems to me where God is leading us and what I need to be giving myself to. Then the last two are a couple of EQ courses. We do both emotional intelligence level 1 training and emotional intelligence level 2 training. Right now, none of these are on the calendar because we've just cycled through our year, and I have to get them on the calendar for next year, but they'll be coming up soon. But if you have any interest in any of those things, you can find information on that website and know about them, and we are available to come and teach most of these anywhere that there's enough interested parties to do so. There you go. That's the final slide. Are there any questions? Hearing none, I'm done. Do you have anything to say, David? Just you're all dismissed.
All right, well, let me just, we ought to thank Ken for being here. So thank you. And we have, and I mentioned it again, we've had Ken come up a couple times and work with our staff, so if you want to think about using that for your board, you know, the power that can come to a board when you talk about strength-based, leadership among your board and so forth, good things can come from all of that. So some of the things he's offering here, if you put on the screen above you, can help you in a lot of different ways. So, great. Hey, well, we'll see you not till after the New Year's over. So, Merry Christmas, Happy Thanksgiving, and Happy New Year's. So we'll see you in January. Drive safe. God be with you.
Well, the Christmas dinner.
What's that?
The Christmas
Christmas dinner. Yes. What is that?
December 16th.
December 16th.
I listened to the announcements. I knew that.
Yeah.